Okay, now we begin the rest of the meeting, which is really the Planning Commission. Any final action taken on the conditional use permit tonight will take effect 5 working days following this meeting unless a written appeal of the Planning Commission's decision is filed in the Planning Office by Monday, January 29th at 5 p.m. In the event of an appeal, the decision will be referred to the County Commission for a hearing on Tuesday, February 20th at or after 9 a.m., and meetings of the County Commissioner are held in this same room. Action taking on the rezoning application tonight will be referred to the County Commission for a hearing on the February 20th at about the same time in this same room. At this time, the Planning Commission will consider the consent agenda. Consent agenda is the approval of the minutes of November 27th. And are there any objections from the Planning Commission to any items on the consent agenda? Okay, then I will read them. If there's anyone in the audience that has any opposition to any of them, will you please raise your hand? And we will remove them from the consent agenda and move them to the regular agenda.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Item 3 is the operation we just considered, right? And so I guess I want to make sure what activities we're going to be approving. So I guess I'd like to
Move that to the regular agenda?
put that on the regular agenda.
Okay. Any others? Okay, item number 3 will move to the regular agenda. Item number 4 is a conditional use permit 18-02, and that is to amend a previous conditional use permit to allow an additional building and site plan adjustments. The petitioner is Joshua and Amanda Nelson. They are the owner of the Blue Barn LLC, and that is located approximately 3 miles west of Sioux Falls. Okay, item number 5, another conditional use permit, 18-03, to transfer 1 building eligibility. The petitioner is Dean Hammer, property owner is Edwin Powers, and that is approximately 3 miles north of Sioux Falls. Item number 6, conditional use permit, 18-04. This would allow a hay grinding business. Petitioner is Travis Holland. Property owner is J.R. Friesen Properties, LLC. That is approximately 3.5 miles west of Crooks. Item number 7, conditional use permit 18-05 would make 1 building eligibility available. The petitioner is Brian Moore. He is also the property owner. And the location is 5.5 miles southwest of Garrettson.
Madam Chair, a question on that one. Are we transferring an eligibility or creating an eligibility? 7.
Scott?
There's one that's there. It has to be made available through the planning commission.
Okay.
It's probably landlocked, or there's some reason, but
Okay.
there's one there. We're not creating one.
Okay. I was just
You
worried
okay with
that
that?
we were creating one. Thank you.
Okay. Item number 8, conditional use permit 18-06. This would allow 4,800 square feet of total accessory building area. Petitioner is John Morris. He's also the property owner, approximately a half mile east of Hartford. I guess that's it, except for the removal of item number 3 to the regular agenda. Motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. So those items that have been approved, you are free to go. Except for item number 3 and the other items on the regular agenda.
There would be 3, 9, and 10, right?
Correct.
Did we approve the consent agenda, or did we just approve the, okay, it's all approved, okay.
Okay, item number 3 is a conditional use Permit 1801. This is to allow a recreational facility, a multi-purpose amphitheater on property that is located at 267-674 66th Avenue, which is 3 miles west of Sioux Falls, generally known as Wildwater West. The applicant is requesting to develop this property. It consists of approximately 10.88 acres. He is requesting to allow a commercial recreational facility, which would be a multi-purpose amphitheater. This is a use that is identified as a conditional use within the A1 agriculture district, and it's consistent with the other recreational uses that are already occurring in the area. I did conduct a staff site visit on the 18th of December, and generally the site is generally level. There has been some grading that's been done to make the site more suitable for past festival events. Wildwater West and Blue Haven Barn are located directly to the south, while a convenience store and the former Second Chance Rescue is located to the north, and the properties to the east and the west are used for agricultural purposes. The applicant prepared a detailed site plan and a narrative explaining how the stage and the concert area would operate and how it would look, and that information has been provided for you for your review. The proposed stage will be approximately 40 feet by 60 feet, and it will stand approximately 6 feet off the ground, and there will be a 48-foot tall canopy that would be covering the stage area. The applicant has applied for a height variance, which you just recently approved, and the applicant has indicated that the existing parking lot for Wildwater West would be used to accommodate parking for the event. There's no landscaping that's been proposed for this project, and the applicant is not proposing any signage for the venue. If there is any signage, it would be required to meet the standards of Article 16 of the county zoning ordinance, which would be our on-premise sign portion of the zoning ordinance. And a building permit will be needed for the erection of the stage, venue, and the concert facility. And the applicant will need to work with the county highway department to obtain any approach permits, should they put in a new approach onto the property. Staff is recommending that concession stands be open and manned while the public is there at any concert event, and that the concession stand would need to have a first aid kit, a fire extinguisher, and the capability of contacting dispatch E911 should there be some kind of medical or other emergency that would arise. In addition, the applicant should use public broadcasting speakers to use if there would be any kind of evacuation due to any potential adverse weather. So there are several criteria that we look at to determine whether a conditional use permit is appropriate for a specific property. And in this case, we look at, number one, whether the use has an effect on the enjoyment and the use of other properties in the area, and what kind of an impact it might have on property values in the immediate vicinity. This is what I would call an expansion of that existing commercial area that's out there. So it should have very little impact on the uses that are already out there. When this location was used for Lifelight, that particular event hosted up to 60,000 attendees over like a per day over a 3 or 4 day time period. And given the fact that that concert venue or that event occurred and there was very little impact on the area, a smaller concert venue like this should have very little impact on the area. Second, or number two, what kind of impact or effect this might have on the normal and orderly development of the area. The property is located approximately half mile south of the intersection of two county highways, and there has been commercial development in the area, so this new use should not impact the normal and orderly development of the area. Three, we are to look at the utilities, access, drainage, and other facilities that might be needed or provided. The site will utilize on-site drainage, And the applicant has indicated that the venue attendees will either walk along the north side of Wildwater West to access the site or walk through the amusement park. The applicant will be proposed to provide toilet facilities, and there is a place for food and water to be obtained if needed by the venue goers. Number 4, is there off-street parking that's been provided, or are the off-street parking requirements being met? The concert venue will utilize the existing Wildwater West parking, which is capable of handling the expected volumes. The applicant also has additional land to expand the parking lot if additional parking is needed, or create a new one for the concert venue. And number 5, are measures taken to control nuisances such as odors, fumes, dust, noise, vibrations, and lighting. There will be some general traffic noise, but one needs to consider that the site is located adjacent to a major county highway. Staff is recommending that the operating hours will be from 8 a.m. till midnight, and the operation of a concert venue in this time frame is reasonable and should not present any kind of nuisance to the average person. And lastly, we look at the health, safety, and general welfare of the public, and we look at how this blends with the comprehensive plan. And staff has reviewed the request and has proposed required conditions that will provide some safety measures for the public. The proposed use is an expansion of the existing recreational areas and activities in the area. The comprehensive plan suggests that commercial development in this area is appropriate as it is near the intersection of a state highway and a county highway. And that being said, staff recommends approval of conditional use permit 1801 to allow a concert venue as a recreational facility with 7 conditions. And I'll read through those conditions for you and for the audience. Number 1, that the applicant follow the site plan that was submitted with the application. Number 2, that the applicant obtain and hold a South Dakota sales tax license. Number 3, that all exterior lighting shall be a shoebox style that directs the light downward, and any lighting on fences shall also be directed downward. Number 4, that the hours of operation shall be daily between 8 a.m. and midnight. Number 5, any new septic system must be reviewed and approved by the South Dakota Department of Environment and Natural Resources, and the applicant shall obtain an on-site wastewater disposal permit from the county prior to construction. Number 6, that the Wildwater West concession stand remain open and manned while the public is present. The concession stand shall have a first aid kit, a fire extinguisher, and the capability to contact E911. The concession stand shall meet all health requirements for food handling required by the state. And number 7, that one illuminated sign be allowed up to 300 square feet, not to exceed 15 feet in height and 15 feet in width, 25 feet in height, and the design shall be approved by the planning department. So I would be glad to answer any questions. I'll show you the slides are going to be similar or identical to the ones you just looked at, but basically this is the stage area and the concert venue with the stage and the 48-foot tall canopy dome. You can see there's quite a lot of area for parking. He's indicated here that there could be additional parking here if they eventually, and this is the 10 acres. This shows you the concert hall, and he has indicated that concert goers will walk along here. There's a nice gravel pathway road, or he'll open up one of the gates through here and allow people to go from the park directly into the concert venue. So I would be glad to answer any questions you have, and once again, Fran Phillips, the applicant's here to answer any questions.
Madam Chair, I do have one question, or maybe an item for discussion. Well, I recognize that, item 4 addresses the times of operation between 8 a.m. and midnight. One thing maybe for discussion would be like when we talk about a mine, the decibel rating of noise to the nearest home. I don't know if that's something that should be taken into consideration, if that's something that's kind of part of that. I just see some residents on the east side there that might be affected by that, but just wanted to bring that up for discussion, that maybe that'd be something that we could look at amending or adding to this.
You certainly can add any conditions that you want about noise levels. I don't have any suggested decibel readings that you could use. So I'm not sure what you would want to put in there, but
My only proposal, my thought, and obviously this is for discussion again, but maybe mirror that back to the mining, that, you know, that my thought at least is that mining is set in place that if you shut your doors and shut your windows, you can reasonably enjoy your home. But again, that's just an assumption, so.
Madam Chair, you know, I
Pat?
kind of agree with what Mike has said there, in the sense that, you know, we had Huset's racetrack all these years, and I could hear it at 57th and Bonson in Sioux Falls when the wind was right. And, you know, then it became under new ownership, and they had more than one race a week. And, you know, I think they were doing 3 and 4, and I think that caused some disruption for the neighbors, the change of schedule, the change of operations. And, you know, I do wonder, you know, how many events are we talking about, what the decibel level might be, and, you know, is Tuesday night at midnight, is that different than Saturday night at midnight, potentially? And maybe the applicant is got some thoughts there, but at the same time, what if it were to change hands and, you know, Badlands Pond were to buy it and decide to crank it up? You know, Aerosmith shrieking away at 11:45 might be disruptive to some of us.
I think Scott had a.
Good thing. Go ahead, Scott.
So really the only, I quickly was thinking about how we monitor noise, and one of the things that we monitor noise for is mining. You may recall there's that decibel noise reading, and I will tell you the way that reads in the zoning ordinance. It says that this is for noise. It says the noise level produced from rock, sand, and gravel operations should not exceed an average of 55 decibel recorded over a 10-minute period measured at the nearest residence to the extraction operation. So I suppose you could, you know, put something in like that, but whatever decibel level you would like to put in, we could craft that condition sort of the same way that we craft it for mining. We could say that the noise level from the concert venue should not exceed an average of X number of decibels, whatever you decide, recorded over a 10-minute period measured at the nearest residence to the recreational use. But I'm not sure what that level should be.
Madam Chair, I wonder if the applicant might have some thoughts on this.
Could you come forward, please?
Francis Phillips again. We have addressed that issue. We hosted Life Flight for those 5 years, 7 years ago. And I actually have friends that live right on the east side of 17. And if you notice where the back, when we had Life Flight, they had 3 concert stages in that particular north field, right off of 17 and then going further west all the way back. Even the stages that were there, a lot closer to 17, you know, weren't very problematic. Now, granted, they were facing kind of at a 45-degree northwest. So in so doing, there's 2 attractive things for us. Number one, we want to be good neighbors because we rely on our local area. There's a lot of season passers that are right in our area, of course, so we have been good neighbors for lots of years. So that's why this particular Quonset that we purchased, that arch design and the way we have it set, you realize it comes all the way down. So it's going to block a lot of that east noise, number one. So most of your noise is going to be irradiated basically north, a little bit northeast. If you look at how we have it set, it's quite a ways off of 17. And as you know, there's nothing to the north. And that old building that was up there, that animal shelter, you know, that's our, but we own that building too. So then the only other building next to it would be the gas station. And then you got to go quite a ways to the north. Going to the east, the first person you're going to see going to the west is the dump. And going to the south, there's nothing there. You go through all of our property, and the next thing is there is that new wedding reception area. So there's so most of the noise that we have, I mean, we have it kind of situated there for a purpose, off the road quite a bit. And I think a majority of that sound, now granted, I don't think we're going to host Van Halen anytime soon, to have those kinds of issues. We have done concerts in the past from time to time, and you know, noise has never been an issue, and I don't even think it was an issue when Lifelight was out there myself. So anyway, Commissioner, we have addressed those two issues, and I think we might have them solved, or at least they've been addressed on our half.
Madam Chair?
Yeah.
You know, I really appreciate that, and the thing is that, you know, we've, like with that Huset situation, you know, we had no way to call them in and ask them to change because they were grandfathered in to do whatever the heck they wanted out there.
Well, we're certainly happy to moderate, I mean, anything we do, because this is an area that primarily the function of this is going to be for our the corporate groups that come out and have picnics. They're the ones that want to be able to have smaller bands come out and things for their larger groups. Citibank, hospitals, those are the kind of people that want to do these kind of things pretty much during the day as well.
Well, and if I may, I know that during Lifelight, the sheriff wasn't happy with the parking on the highway, you know, where people were impinging on the lane of traffic,
Right.
Because they were parked on both sides. And
Right.
you know, if things get escalated there, what can we, you know, will you work with us? I mean,
Oh, listen, absolutely. I think I worked with planning department, you guys, I've been out there for almost 30 years now. So I'm happy to, if we have an event, I will let Scott know that we're planning to have an event. And if there's feedback from that event, I'm happy to, to do whatever that is necessary. Absolutely.
well, I favor, you know, your project. I think it sounds like a pretty good plan. I just don't want it to turn into 300,000 people and, you know.
Well, if it turns into 300,000 people, we're going to close the water park and get into the concert business real fast. I kind of doubt that, but
Any other questions?
Madam
Becky?
Chairman, can I just say one thing of comparing this to Huset's? If you recall, Huset's does not have a conditional use permit, so that's all grandfathered in. This would be operating under a conditional use permit, and there are provisions in there for us to recall that should there be problems. So we would go through a process to recall it.
Yeah, that's true.
There's the difference between Huset's and this, one of the differences.
So to clarify, Scott, if I may, Madam Chair, is we could always ask the applicant to come back in if it started to become an issue, concerts too much, neighbors being concerned.
Or if there's an
Every Tuesday night, a concert till midnight.
Madam Chair, just a point of order. Being as we are recording this, Scott should come to the microphone and speak so that it gets on the show. Sometimes, by the way, overhead lights make us look bald.
Anything further?
I had a couple of questions. I was wondering, how many parking spaces are there currently?
well, we have several parking areas. All right, if you look on the upper right-hand area, kind of, and you're moving east, right, where it says parking right there, there's 250 spaces right there to the northeast in that area right there, okay? And then as you move west, there's another 200 spaces before you get to that concert area. So you're looking at 500 some spaces, plus you've got, if you look due east in front of the water park here, you've got all of that space running from that white building right there that you see in the bottom corner, all the way going south. there's another 1,000 spaces there, and then there's another 500 spaces to the south running out to the west. So our parking is horseshoed around the entire facility.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a question. I'm well aware of the parking is out there, but when you have a concert, will somebody be monitoring some of the parking that's going on there so that there won't be something on the highway, which would be a safety issue?
Well, all during our operation hours now,
Okay.
we have 3 parking attendants that we have roaming through all day long. First of all, watching for parking, for security,
Okay.
for drinking, because we have an on-site malt beverage license, so there's no drinking anywhere other than inside of our chain link fence. So, of course, we would monitor it always.
Any other questions? Mike, were you satisfied with
Oh,
what
yeah,
they were
you know,
talking?
especially, considering that, my concern obviously was with the neighbors, and knowing that we can call them back, if that does become an issue, that I'm more than satisfied, absolutely.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. Madam Chair, I have one other question. I'm sorry, sir. Where would you envision restroom facilities to be on that, or are they going to use the restrooms within Wildwater West? And I
Well-
know Lifelight had camping, and is that something you envision as part of this as well?
Question number 1, parking. That would depend on the size of the concert. It's gonna be, per event. So we could, do porta potties, we could get trailers. At the moment, there won't be a permanent restroom facility, but we will, depending on the size of the venue that we expect, a lot of them are gonna be very small events. But we can certainly use the restrooms and shower facilities in the water park, which is gonna be, I think, a bulk of our business, will be the corporate events are in the water park that will then traverse through the water park into the concert grounds for a couple of hours, have the concert, and then come back. So, yeah, the restrooms won't be an issue, very much like Lifelight, or very much like other concerts we've had. Your second question was?
Camping.
No, won't be any camping in the north, no, No overnight.
Thank you. Sorry you had to come back up.
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion to approve this conditional use permit.
I'll second.
Okay, a motion's been made and seconded to approve item number 3. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. We'll move on to item number 9. Kevin?
Kevin Hookman, County Planning Department. I'm bringing to you item number 9, which is rezoning number 1801. And this is to rezone a property legally described and mapped similar to that in the Benton Township, currently unplatted. And the rezoning is to rezone from A1 Agricultural Zoning District to the Planned Development District of Hope Harbor Planned Development. The petitioner is Hope Harbor. The site is located approximately a half-mile southwest of Crooks. The proposed rezoning area would take up approximately 13.2 acres of the southeast quarter of the quarter section there. The Hope Harbor Planned Development District, and then on the northwest corner of Highway 130 and 469th Avenue, as shown on the map. In this location, it would be noted that it is in the joint platting jurisdiction of the city of Crooks, so the petitioner will have to, once this does get platted off, will have to be approved by both the county and the city of Crooks for a plating area. The petitioner has submitted detailed narratives of their proposed use, and the planned development's primary use will be for group homes. The narrative also includes site plans and a general overview. The overview includes that this project will be a group home for teen boys, which will stay at the residences for approximately 12 months at a time for behavior and other types of counseling reasons that they would be staying there voluntarily. The group homes will be taking place in single-family dwellings on the site. The narrative of the site plan show, I'll just bring up the site plan, show that there will be dwellings on the site up to 3. The zoning district notes that 3 dwellings will be the maximum number allowed on the zoning district. The dwellings will be constructed for housing the boys, and the site plan also shows that each dwelling will have a separate accessory building as well. And the accessory building will be used for school activities such as vocational type training and schools. The planned development also includes that these accessory buildings may include what's called accessory dwelling unit, and that would include a potential for, say, a small apartment-sized house that would be used for temporary quarters of family or staff that may need to stay on site for a night or two. Each dwelling has its own driveway and a small parking lot, and each accessory dwelling or accessory building shows a small parking lot on the site plan as well. For this type of rezoning, it's a planned development, so the petitioner is able to list out their desires for what they want to do with the property and what sort of layout they want to have. And as this parcel here currently does not have any building eligibilities, this would allow these 3 dwellings to be built without building eligibilities. The planned development also would allow the group home to be allowed by right. So once it's rezoned, they would just be able to build and occupy the space as a group home as it is. The Minnehaha County Comprehensive Plan, adopted in 2015, does not directly address developments quite like this. It does address similar institutions such as schools and public institutions for citing future development plans. And as such, this is a similar group home type organization used for institutional use. Let's see. The area is in an active agricultural zone, and as this site is going to be placed near Crooks, but there is also a dairy that is located approximately 1.5 miles to the west of the proposed site, and the petitioner should be aware of any sort of agricultural use in the area, as when you put houses, as we all know, houses in the rural area can cause have issues with the potential odors and traffic of tractors in the area. The county comprehensive plan does frequently address rural housing density, and as I noted, there isn't any building eligibilities left for this property or will not be used for this property. Typically, staff has not wanted to approve, and the Planning Commission has not wanted to approve added building eligibilities, but the site is primarily being rezoned for the intent of this group home facility. But the Commission should be aware that if the project was to fail, the dwellings may be converted into single-family dwellings at if they were to sell the property to a different property owner. Let's see. The petitioner has noted in conversation that the searching for this rural area for this group home has been primary for them to allow outdoor activities and space for accessory structures for vocational type training. The developing of the group home within the city would not allow for this desired effect, and that's the reason for the proposal to be put out in the rural area. Rezoning proposals generally meet the policies and objectives of the comprehensive plan, and the county has supported similar type plan developments of mixed institutional, agricultural, and dwelling uses. Most of you are probably familiar with McCrossen's Boys Ranch, and that is a planned development with that mix of uses to allow multiple dwellings in one property and such. I'm not going to get into too many specifics about their organization and how they're planning their group home. I suppose the petitioner will kind of help with that. But their submitted narrative has been provided to you, and I'll go over the site plan here. So staff visited the site, and looking at it, you can see that it looks like most cornfields in the area. You'll see that there is a stream that loosely, maybe I can get it here, there it is, that loosely bounds the property on the northwest side of the property. And it is fairly hilly because as that stream creates a valley in the property. The petitioner has the site plan shows that the access would be off of the township road for Benton Township. So they would have to get access through the approval from the township for those access points. Look up the road. This is an existing driveway for our field approach, which may be converted into an approach for the site plan. This is looking across the highway to the neighbor to the east, and you can see the shelter belt there across from the field. This is looking kind of the southeast of the property. You can see it slants down into the valley. The part of the property is located within the regulatory floodplain, and the petitioner is aware of that, and they will have to work either outside of that floodplain or meet the floodplain ordinance as when construction time comes. And this is a view looking from 469th to the west along the highway. A development like this, having it near the highway, does have the advantage of easy access to a little more intensity use. And then this is looking east along the highway. And then this is south, and you can see the grove of trees to the south of the nearest neighbor to the south. And I guess at that, staff does recommend approval of rezoning 1801 to create the Hope Harbor Planned Development District as presented in your staff report. Is there any questions?
No questions for Kevin? Is the petitioner here?
I hope somebody's here. Okay.
Could you please state your name and your address?
My name is Cheryl Moe. I live at 704 North Agate Avenue in Brandon, South Dakota, 57005.
Any questions from the commission? Jeff?
I always have a couple, I'm sorry. Normally we make people have a building eligibility to build a home out in the county. And in a sense, we're creating some building eligibilities here. And obviously, if the project were to fail, they would exist, and so would those outbuildings, which, which then, could also be made into dwellings or something. Do you feel like you're likely to succeed in this project?
I believe so. First of all, I would like to say that I'm here on behalf of my sister, Cindy McKittrick, who's executive director, and then Claudia Stenson, who's the Hope Harbor expansion team coordinator, and they were unable to be here due to weather.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm here. I'm on the expansion team. I've been part of the expansion team for probably a year now. So I may not be able to adequately answer all of your questions, but I do have Dan here, who's can you come up, Dan? And he might be able to answer some of the questions that you have about the eligibilities.
Well, I guess if I may, and this is a little bit in the weeds, but what responsibility keep coming? What responsibility would the public schools there, Tri-Valley, have with making this? Would they need to help instruction with the residents there?
No. Would you like me to explain a little bit about how? Okay. So Hope Harbor is an interdenominational Christian ministry, and their ministry is full of God's hope, forgiveness, and grace, with a loving staff that's committed to restoring young lives through biblical, Christ-centered healing. So Hope Harbor has been operating a home for teen girls in Marshall, Minnesota, since 2005. And in October 2017, they opened another home in Winona, Minnesota for girls. Hope Harbor in Marshall has served over 70 teen girls, their families, and then many of these are coming from the Sioux Falls and surrounding areas. And the home that we're talking about here would house up to 9 boys, and they'd be ages 12 to 17. As far as the program, so Hope Harbor serves teen boys between the ages of 12 and 17, and it's a Christ-centered, biblically based residential setting. And so they hire their own counselor, teacher, and staff. And for this particular home, they would be looking at hiring male staff, male site director. And so the way the program works, the families are the ones that place these teens served rather than court-ordered or social services placed. So these are teens whose families are seeking help because their son has an unmet need that may have resulted from a trauma such as an adoption, a divorce, being bullied, death, school failure, rejection, sexual abuse, etc. The parents are seeking help as a preventative measure. Families are an integral part of the program, participating in their own counseling, family counseling, and parenting classes. And so this is all done on site, at the residential home. So a thorough screening process it occurs before placement, and the teens with a repeated history of any violence or sexual deviant behavior will not be accepted into the program. So the screening process includes a telephone interview followed by an application in which school records, counseling records, and past history are reviewed. Upon completion and review of the application, an interview is completed that includes the Hope Harbor leadership team, parents, and the child. If everyone agrees that the placement is appropriate, the child will be placed at Hope Harbor. And then immediately following placement, a set of screening tools are administered that help enable the Hope Harbor team to develop the most appropriate plan for the resident. If at any time following placement is determined by the team that they're unable to meet the mental health or the needs of the resident, or the teen or family are not complying with the program requirements, or the behaviors of the teen are potentially harmful to himself, staff, or other residents, the teen will be removed from the program. So I don't know if that helps answer some of your questions as far as what the program is.
It does help.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I have one. So they aren't referred to you by any agency or
No.
whatsoever?
No.
They seek you out?
Yes.
Madam Chair,
Becky?
I would just say I'm familiar with your program in Marshall
Okay.
and hear positive things about that program. So I'm assuming that this program would run as well as the program in Marshall does.
Yes.
Anyone else?
We still have to ask questions, and,
Yeah.
you know, obviously, this is going to be in a rural area, and you need to recognize, and we ask all rural residents who aren't in the agricultural business to recognize that agriculture is an industry, and there's going to be, you know, noises and smells and activities under the moon going on in the process of planting and harvesting and fertilizing, etc. And you know, I would hate to have you here complaining about your neighbor's new barn in 6 months
Sure.
because it is an agricultural area still, although it's clearly transitioning into more of our metropolitan area. And so I just want to make sure you're understanding that.
We're aware of that, yeah. The other thing that I had on here, in addition to the core competencies that we have, which are education, counseling, life skills, and spiritual growth, the Hope Harbor program, the teens will participate regularly in physical fitness activities, attend church, and then participate in community service projects, care for the property, and participate in vocational skills, maybe, you know, car repairs, building projects, and others. And then they also like the teens to get involved in the community, so we're hoping to get to know the neighbors and maybe, you know, they can help the neighbors with different projects, or it's just a, you know, program where they like to just be involved with the community. With the girls in Marshall, they go to the retirement homes and paint ladies' nails, and, you know, they're out in the community a lot, just giving back and serving. So that's what this program would be looking to do as well in the Crooks area. But we understand we're rural, in the rural area.
Any other questions? Sir, would you like this picture that you put out here? Is this what?
Yes, what you said, Mr. Barth, is that there's no eligibilities there, and you're creating more eligibilities. I think when you hear this and it's kind of hitting you for the first time, you're thinking of an institution, and it's not. It is 3 residential homes there, because we don't want to have these boys come into an institutional setting. We want them to, you know, be in a home setting and create as much of that home bodiness as we can. Jay Wallstra is also on our board, and Jay said, these are the kind of kids, he said, that don't give us any trouble in school. He said they're giving their parents trouble at home. So what we're trying to do is keep these kids from escalating into more of an aggressive nature or something like that, so that we don't get to that stage where they would need to go to McCrosson's or something else like that. So anyway, it would be 3 residential homes. And of course, with any business, you have to have an exit strategy. We don't intend to fail. This program is, or this group has been working on this for, I think it's 8 years or maybe 9 years. So we didn't just, you know, think, oh God, wouldn't it be nice to build some homes out there or whatever. This has been long planned and long thought of, and we finally feel that we've reached the time now when it's correct. The site was chosen because it is out in the country. We do realize that there's dairy barns and things like that would happen. That's, you know, that's totally acceptable. And the reason, you know, we talked about this shop and things like that, it will be an outbuilding just like you would have at any other residence, or may have at any other residence. And working on cars doesn't mean there's going to be vehicles outside parked. All we want to do is teach these boys how to change the oil, you know, how to change the tire, do things like that. But I'm mainly involved in the construction part of that, and I've donated my services. The land is being donated, if you approve this and we get through our stage. The land is being donated by Gary Haar and his family. Our foundation has committed $300,000 towards this first project, so we have a lot of support behind this, and this is something that's definitely needed. know, everybody always says, why doesn't somebody do something? Well, there's a bunch of us that are going to do something, so we ask for your support. But as far as any other grading issues, floodplain issues, things like that, you know, I'm here to answer those questions. So.
Okay, could you please state your name, sir, and your
Dan,
address?
Dan Lemmy, and I actually live in Madison, South Dakota, but I have a company down here in Sioux Falls at 5735 East 41st Street.
It's right by my house.
Oh, well, hi, neighbor.
Any other questions? Doug?
Could you, doesn't have to be exact, somewhere around the square footage of these units, and then what you're thinking for the outbuilding, what square footage that may entitle, and with the road, maybe it was stated, is it gravel, are you gonna have it paved, or how is that gonna be taken care of?
Well, of course, it's according to budget. You know, what we're on a gravel road right now, and you've seen the pictures of the access off of that road. We would take that road and then loop that around for the 3 homes that would be there. And of course, we would love to have that be asphalt. Might be gravel to start with, but asphalt is so much easier for cleaning snow and not blowing rocks all over and things like that. So we would like it to have asphalt. And we have had some commitments by different construction companies, Merlin Roy's, and we're hoping that that we could have asphalt on that. And we won't be accessing off the highway. I think the Planning Commission has told you that, so there won't be a safety issue there.
How about the square footage of each unit?
Of each home, that is a, I don't know what you call a preliminary plan of what the home would look like. And again, it's a very, very nice house. But we're probably looking at anywhere from 3,500 to 4,000 square feet up and down, because there will be a finished lower level, or, you know, a rec room just like your house. In every way, shape, and form, it's a single-family residence. And again, it's for that backup plan that we don't seeing it fail. It could expand, and of course, we don't have any more grounds. So then maybe we would, you know, move to a different port or our property or whatever, and then that would be for sale. Again, we hope this is something that would go on for years and years and years, but everything's got a beginning, everything's got an end. Ecclesiastics.
Any other questions? Okay,
Thank you.
For me?
I think, any other questions for her? Okay, then we'll move on. Any other people in the audience which wishes to come up and speak? Please state your name and your address, please.
So my name is Kurt Huskin, and I live at 1437 West Waterstone Drive here in Sioux Falls. And so I've got 3 boys, and they all turned out good, and I'd probably likely due to my wife. But I also have some friends, and they've done everything right, and for whatever reason, the kids are just giving them some problems, and they don't know where to go. And I've been at Hope Harbor and Marshall. I've seen several other organizations like this with very high success rate, and I think anything we can do to facilitate these parents and help these kids would be a good thing. I'm here in support of it because I plan to donate not only financially to this, but also with my time. I hope to spend time with the boys out there. If that means changing tires, I'll change tires. But I also have an agricultural background, and so that might be some gardens or some planting or who knows what. I'll donate my services, however. But the big thing is just link up with these boys and yeah, get them on a good path. So I'm just in support of this project.
Thank you. Anyone else?
My name's Tony Lemire. I live in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And I'm just presenting or talking to you on behalf of a parent. I had a daughter who went through the program in Marshall, Minnesota 2 years ago. And my wife and I have been married for over 25 years. We have 3 other children, And I can see the need for this because my oldest is a boy and then I have 3 other girls, but just through the work I've done in the past, I'm former law enforcement, worked with juveniles, I've done counseling in different areas, and there's just a strong demand. And the only place for boys right now is several hundred miles away, or actually states away. And but the success of this program with my daughter went from being kind of lost with the family and separating herself from the rest of us. And due to, wasn't a violent nature or anything like that, but a lot of different internet things that happened to her. And, she needed that healing. We weren't sure how to do that as parents. We did our best, and we presented to Hope Harbor. They accepted us, and we went through the program as well with our daughter. Parents were involved. We went there every week for counseling, just to get to know how to help our daughter. And right now, my daughter, you asked about the schooling before, Mr. Barth. They have Hope Light Academy, which is accredited for all high schools. And she went from being behind about a year to graduating ahead of time with honors, and got several scholarships for Augustana University, where she's on the dean's list. And it's just, this program is needed. It's not for violent offenders. It's not, it was a voluntary base. She was not sentenced to this or anything like that. And so I've just seen the success of this as a parent. And I have been a part of the planning committee since I left the program, or my daughter left the program. And I hope to maybe even be on staff there. So that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
My name is Janine Dieters, and we just live a little ways from there. I've never spoken in front of a group like you before, but there's a few things that have bothered me. One thing is they say that these kids are all really good kids. Now, I've worked with the school system for many, many years, and I know there's good in all kids. But they have told us in the paperwork that these kids are there because they're in danger of hurting themselves or hurting others, or they've hurt their families. Well, what kind of security systems and neighbors are they going to be? They want us all as neighbors to be included in helping these kids. We need to embrace them, help them learn to change oil. They've already asked neighbors, they can come over and groom your horses. Won't that be wonderful? They can come over and maybe help you with your garden. We don't have time for that. I'm not going to risk any liabilities of having these kids come over. I've talked to a lot of neighbors, some that couldn't be here, some are elderly, that we aren't happy about it. We think there's other places that they can be served very well, and not our quiet, peaceful little agriculture area that we've all worked for so long to keep it this way. In fact, we've watched a pair of eagles on this land that they're taking over. And these houses are big that they're building. It's going to be, their plans are very extensive for a lot of building, and I think there's going to be more traffic. I think there's going to be a lot more noise. I'm worried about the comfort level of our neighbors that we've been there for years. We have to speak out to and say how we feel. We're not happy about it. And I just want you to know that. Oh, one other thing too is they need a rural area. Well, the other homes that they have since 2005 are all residential in town, and they've done wonderful. So it can be done in town. In fact, maybe they'd have access to much more resources than out in a rural area. And the fact, they bring up the fact that, oh, boys need this space. They need the, well, to be fair, that's kind of discriminatory too. Really, if this was a fact, they're kind of discriminating against all these girls' homes that they're doing well. They're in residential areas. I don't think boys really would prosper better in a rural area than in a residential area. That's kind of unfair to say that. If the girls are doing fine, let's give even time. You know, the boys would do fine in a residential area too. And a lot, they mentioned they're in there a year, but at their other meeting, they have a lot of repeats. They have no phones, no computers, a lot of rules, a lot of prayer, which I'm all for. Then they send them back out to reality. Well, there is a lot of repeats because they've had all these things taken away from them, and then they're put back into society, and they're not really, I've heard stories, and it's just my own opinion too, that it is hard to put them back and expect them to excel when they've had all this taken away and then we're put back out there. I think I'll let someone else have a chance now.
Madam Chair? Could
Becky?
Could we pull up the map so we could see where her home is located, please?
So ma'am, is
Ma'am,
your,
where are you located here on the map? Can you show us?
Yeah, just a mile west under that white square there.
Oh, under the
mi-
square, okay, thank you.
a mile west, okay.
Anybody else in the audience care to come forward?
Madam Chair, we should differentiate between proponents and opponents.
Pardon me?
We should differentiate between proponents and opponents.
Okay, are you,
I'm a proponent, and I have children home that have school tomorrow, so I need to go. So my name is Heather McCauley, and I live at 1508 West 71st Street in Sioux Falls. I have a daughter that is currently at Hope Harbor in Marshall. I am 100% in favor of a home in Sioux Falls for boys. I would love for there to be a home in Sioux Falls for girls too, but 2 hours is much better than 10, and that's the closest boys' home away from here. I could talk forever, and I'm not going to, but just the one thing that I want to address from the one gal that spoke was the taking everything away and having all these rules and then throwing the children back into the real world. Is there is an extensive transition period. There are phases that the children go through as they're able to, as they progress through the program. And as my daughter is right now, she's just starting this transition phase where we work together to reintroduce social media. We work together to reintroduce friends. We work together to reintroduce school and different social and family and peer situations. So they're not just thrown back into the, into the hornet's nest, into the world they came from. And both the parents and the children are much more equipped to tackle any challenges that occur. So as far as that concern goes, I can't stress enough how Hope Harbor does prepare these kids for coming, for meeting those challenges that without Hope Harbor, they're having to try to navigate on their own, and their parents aren't equipped to help them through that. So that's all I want to say, but as you can see, there is a huge need in this area. As was said, the closest facility for boys are hours and hours away, and I've talked to numerous parents who have done that, have sent their children to Utah or to Michigan, and there is such a need here that I feel like because Hope Harbor, the expansion team has spent so much time thinking through and praying through and working through Sioux Falls, they're going to continue to try to have a facility in the Sioux Falls area if it's not in Crooks. But if it's not in the Crooks area, how many children are going to miss their window of opportunity? How many families are going to not have the support of Hope Harbor for the next year or two while we found the next location? This area is wonderful. You've got the land, you've got the building support, you've got, you know, people that are ready to come and help and come alongside it. But if we need to try to find another area now, families are going to suffer, and families in this area are going to suffer. So, thank you.
Any more proponents? Any opponents?
Thank you, Commission, for letting me speak here. I'm Tom Winterstein, a neighbor to the south. And my PowerPoint presentation here is going to be a little unorganized, but I think that nobody's arguing that there's a need for that. I mean, nobody's saying that that's not necessary for that facility. As a matter of fact, we have a nephew that we lost about 4 years ago that started going down that path and did not make it out of it. So I don't think anybody in the neighborhood is saying it's not necessary. But as anything, location is the question. And as a commission, your responsibilities, you know, that comprehensive plan or whatever, is what you're trying to guidance over. And so I think we kind of need to think about when we start changing things a little bit, where will it go to? And of course, the closer you are to the urban center, the more difficulty you people are going to have containing things and making sure that it follows pattern. You get out another 20, 30, 40 miles, even within the county, less pressure, that less resistance to it, and less changes that are going to happen over time. So I think it's, you know, once again, I don't want to repeat that, you know, we're not saying we're against the concept. The question is location, and is this the best location for it? So that's kind of the primary thing. Then when Kevin spoke about that, or Mr. Hookman spoke about that, this change of opening up eligibilities seems to be a question. So if it can happen here, why can't it happen there? And what will continue? And opening up, I don't know how this works exactly, but when you have a parcel that's changed into a planned development in amongst the agriculture area, then does that make easier access for an additional portion to continue? I mean, is it like that foot in the door kind of thing here? So that's what a lot of us are wondering about. And there's just a lot of things that, I don't know, there's a lot of background to that has a question too, because I'm sure you're aware that years ago when this property was purchased, Spader was the owner of the original 80 to the west, and then Har and Lemmy partnered or whatever to become this Crooks Investment LLC. And an early proposal was to draw a street from the blacktop on the south to the blacktop on the west with 75 to 100 houses, and that failed. And of course, the reason it failed was because Minnehaha County was wise enough to see the mistakes that Lincoln County had made in popping up developments hither and thither without growing around the existing communities. So that was good foresight for Minnehaha County, and then that is the reason that that proposal failed. But the fact that this is adjacent to that property, and we don't know what the ultimate intent of that might be, there's just a fair amount of suspicion as to why here and why next to a 220-acre parcel that is, what would I say, owned by investors that are not necessarily just particularly interested in it for corn and beans. So that's a lot of what's rumbling around in the background with the neighbors there. So that's one part of it. Let's see. Yeah, and then I think that was briefly addressed. If it would fail, then you've got these 3 houses out there. Well, you know, have we changed now where you can get eligibilities via going this route? So it just is, yeah, hopefully it would be, I mean, I'm sure they're hopeful that it would continue to function well and not terminate, but you don't know what can happen on that. And if it does open a door for expanding those planned development areas in that area, then they're not adjacent to Crooks yet. There's a fair amount of distance to that. So it is just poking a hole in a new area. And of course, you know, back to the same thing. I mean, everybody knows there's a need for that, but it's just a question, would this fit more appropriately another 20 miles from the urban area, or another 15 miles, or this direction or that direction, where growth is slower, where there would be less of an opportunity for other people to come in later on and say, well, you did, you know, you okayed this, so why can't you okay us? So that's kind of part of what's going on there. But like I said, there, and then evidently this was proposed in Lincoln County, and it did not succeed. But that wasn't anything that was brought to us forehanded by the group. I mean, we had to kind of find that out on our own. So I guess the essence of it is there's just a little bit of suspicion as to what the full intent of this is. And as well as how big is Hope Harbor? Is it just those 2 facilities? One of the other neighbors had looked into it, and there was a facility in Nebraska that was Hope Harbor that he thought was a part of the parent company of this, which was like a residency of 90. So I don't know, there's just a lot of things, and we're not very organized here, obviously. We're just kind of talking amongst ourselves and kind of coming up with what questions we have that haven't been really well answered. And there's a bunch of other stuff on here, but I do not know where it's at. It's kind of a mess. So yeah, the comprehensive plan, that was one of it. And then of course there's some details, smaller details probably, but just logistical speaking. So, you know, if you've got 3 facilities out there, 9, 9, 20, 27, ends up 30 students, and it fails for some reason or whatever, or some other entity takes it over and decides they're not going to school on site, and then they become students of Tri-Valley School District. I don't know if the school district has even been notified of this, actually. I think you said that they hadn't had notice of it, but so, you know, that's another thing that was kind of moving forward over the Christmas holidays here without some real good examination, I think. And, you know, that is something that if those became students at Tri-Valley and this fell under a nonprofit, then of course there'd be no tax revenue there, right? No property tax, I think. So, you know, things that just haven't been cleared up yet. And of course, you know, this is separate, but it is an agriculture area. There is a dairy nearby, and we we rent to that dairy, and they do spread manure on our place, and we're right to the south there. So it gets a little whiffy now and then. There's no doubt about that. And this isn't by any means anything that would qualify as an ag facility. Yeah, they might grow some garden, they might grow some trees, but that's a long ways probably from, you know, any way of putting it under the agricultural umbrella, I think. So those were some of the things that we had jotted down here. And I think the bigger thing, or the bigger question, which will be really hard to find an answer to or know, is you know, is this the beginning of something else for this 220 acres, or is it the beginning of something that others can point to and say, well, it was okay here, why isn't it okay there, that you'll have to deal with later? And we just think once again, I think we feel that definitely needed. I mean, I've seen plenty of that with, well, our nephew as well as others. But just, is this the best location for it? If they're looking for rural, you can go out a ways and still have all those amenities or whatever. And, like she said, the other ones are urban, are in town. So that is part of what we were thinking about amongst ourselves. Now, we're not certainly organized at all here. We just have kind of been chatting a bit, and we didn't present anything together formally with points, point A, point B and stuff. So we just kind of, what we're thinking about are those issues right now.
The petitioner come back up and maybe address some of your issues?
Could do
See if
that.
they could answer any of your questions that you might have had?
Yeah, if some of them are answerable.
Okay,
Some of them are probably
Asked
not.
a question before he goes.
okay, sure, Jeff.
So what would make this project easier to live with for you? What would make it more palatable?
For me?
Yeah.
Well, definitely vested interest. I'm right next door.
Is your house on the screen here?
Yeah, right to the south, the grove of trees.
Right down there? Okay.
Mhm. And so, of course, it's, everybody has that, the old not in my backyard thing.
Yeah.
But I think that, so, I may admit a vested interest in here, but also that longer-term comprehensive plan, I think, is something that really needs to be
That's a
kind of
good
looked at.
question, but, I mean, a good issue, but.
Right.
So what would make this a better project from your point of view, besides it not being there?
Well,
What-
yeah,
what-
that
what
would be the
could they
primary
do
one,
that-
not being there. And then, of course, if it was buffered would help, if there was a grove of trees along the highway, which, something maybe that could be negotiated or whatever. But that would make it more palatable for me personally, but that wouldn't change some of the other concerns. And if it became 220 acres of a bigger production, it'd take a lot of trees to buffer that out. And, this is a whole separate deal, but there's even some talk of what eventually will happen with McCrossins. They're sitting on high-value land over there on the interstate, very high-value land. So, is there a possibility that sometime they will look for a different location to relocate a little farther away from the city? It's just rumblings that are going around with a lot of these other things in the neighborhood, but those are never things that we'll know for sure, just as we won't know for sure what Har and Lemming's ultimate intent of that 220 acres is. So you can't get answers to that until it happens.
Any other
And
questions?
then, it's like the horse is out of the barn by then.
Sir, maybe we'll have a petitioner come up and he can see if he can address.
Sure. Should I go sit down?
Sure, please.
Thank you.
I tried to write down the questions that the neighbors would have, and we're here to answer those questions. But anyway, as far as the development, originally Dwayne Spader owned that land, and he had a drawing that he'd brought in of a housing district. Dwayne wanted to sell that. We looked at it, thought that's not too bad of an idea because we're developers. So what we did is we bought that land from Dwayne, and then we went to the city of Crooks, not Minnehaha County, but we went to the city of Crooks to have that, see what the possibility of annexing that property would be, and they said that they had no interest in that. So what we did at that time, Har and Lemmy Development bought that land and owned it. We turned around and sold that to Jack Har. Jack said, well, he said, because we were going to sell it, we got turned down, there was no interest from Crooks to develop, or for having us develop, so we moved on. So Jack bought that land, and now that land belongs to the Har Family Trust. And that's where the connection there is, as far as how that 10 acres became available. They said, yeah, we donate that. So right now, that belongs to the Har Family Trust. It's a farm, and who knows what it'll be down the road. That's, you can say right now there are no plans, and there aren't. But 50 years from now, that's going to be different. But anyway, we do not own the land. That's the Har Family Trust. And then talking about the location, is that, you know, at the last one, when we were down in Lincoln County, they said, well, there's a spot out by Pine Ridge or something like that, you know, and it's like, you know, we can't be too far out. The reason to locate in the country is to have, I guess, you know, just have not so many attraction or distractions as the city. But we can't be too far out either, because we've got Sioux Falls Christian, we've got several churches that have said we want to be a part of helping these kids, but they're not going to travel very far. So what we want to do is be outside in the country, but not too far from the city. So that's another reason why we think this is a perfect location for this.
And staff as well.
And staff, yeah, because if you're way out, you know, it's hard to get people to go out. That's why these little small towns are kind of dying off, is because you can't get people to live out that far. So anyway, our need is to be out in the country, but close to town. And then, yes, Lincoln County, when we went down there to do that, the neighborhood became very nervous about us being there and whether we are going to fit into the neighborhood. They said, you know what, guys, we're all for this, but not in our neighborhood. And we're going to have this no matter where we go. So we've got a good location. We really think that we'll be a good fit for the neighborhood. It's a need that's out there for these kids, and that's why we're asking you to approve this. As far as the Hope Harbor, Nebraska, I don't know anything about that.
It's not the same. It's a different affiliation. And then as far as the residential program, it includes on-site Christian counseling, and it's a school, in-house school that meet graduation requirements and spiritual growth. So he mentioned Tri-Valley School, and have we contacted them? There's really no need to, because what's the program, Tony?
Life Hope Academy.
Life Hope.
Life Hope Academy.
Life Hope Academy is who they're accredited through. So we won't be going to Tri-Valley School. We don't need that. I don't remember. Security, I think, was one of the things that he brought up. And there will be, Hope Harbor is not a lockdown facility. Therefore, residents will not be restrained if they attempt to leave. However, Hope Harbor is committed to provide a safe place for residents, staff, and neighbors. And we will install the most current and effective security systems to ensure that all involved are safe. So, you know, we haven't had a problem in the last 12 years, but we do recognize that we would need security if a window should open, and it's for the safety of the staff as well as the children that are there, the teens. So I don't remember some of the other questions that he had that I might be able to address.
Madam Chair. Go ahead.
Paul, go ahead.
I think one of the questions in regards to the school was, what if the facility were to close? Where would these kids go? So could you answer that question? Say hypothetically it closed and there were 27
Hypothetically, they'd go back to their home
families.
school district, yeah. So, you know, if they were attending school in, you know, Roosevelt, they'd go back to Roosevelt, I'm sure. You know, I mean, just whatever school district they were in. So.
Thanks.
Becky?
Yes. My question was, would you be open to planting more trees? You have trees drawn on the plan, but it's not like a
grove that would block it off.
Like
Yeah.
a grove that would be 3 to 5
I don't know
rows.
why not. I mean, you know, the homes will be beautiful, so I don't know why, you know, hiding them, but if that's what the neighbors need or want, I'm sure that would be a possibility. I can't say for certain that's what we'll do.
On the tree issue is that we have a lot of tree huggers on the committee, and so if it was my choice, I'd go out there and I'd plant 1,000 trees. So if there's any requirement for trees,
Yeah.
or even a berm of some sort, if that would make the neighbors feel more comfortable, we would certainly do that.
And, you know, the first lady that talked, you know, she talked about she doesn't want these kids. Well, they don't have to go help them. You know what I mean? We were just thinking that get them involved in the community, and so, you know, if they don't want them on their property or don't want them coming to help with gardening or horses or whatever, we're not going to force that upon them. It's just we're thinking it'd be a good way to connect, so.
Any other questions?
I was just wondering, how close are your other facilities to the towns, to the nearest towns? How far outside of town are they?
The Hope Harbor, Minnesota, Marshall,
Minnesota, yeah.
Minnesota is in the city limits. It's in, you know, when they first opened that home, the neighbors were against it. And now, they've been there for 12 years. I mean, the neighbors, they don't even, there's just no problems, and they're friends with them, and they interact with them, and there's just, you know, nothing changed. It, you know, if anything, it got better. The home in Winona, again, I haven't been there, but I do believe it's in city limits as well. The home was donated by a family, and so that's why and the same with the one in Marshall. You know, the home was donated, so that's why they chose to open the first one there.
Any other questions? Okay, I'm going to close the floor.
Okay, thank you for your
Reading through the
time.
things. Is it anything additional than what you've already talked about?
Have to come to the microphone.
Come to the mic, please.
Other than the fact that we, you know, there's always that what if down the road, which is impossible to answer, just like they can't say, well, what they're going to want to do with the other 220 acres, et cetera. But if the facility did not continue to function or functioned fine, but was sold to a different entity that did not have school on site, then those students would be residents of these group homes. And then I suppose they would be the responsibility of Tri-Valley if they did not have education at the facilities. So there's just a lot of these what-ifs that I think you as a commission have to kind of think about, because, like I said, once you start making some changes in the plan of what's ag and what's not ag, you'll have to address it with additional groups eventually. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thanks. Are you an opponent?
Yes.
Okay.
Troy Kretschmeyer, I live just a mile north of this. I guess I'm just kind of wondering why we're putting so many juvenile facilities on the north side of town. We already have them at crossings. I own property over at the Renner Crooks exit, and we've had, you know, people leave McCrossins, or boys leave McCrossins in the middle of the night, steal vehicles and stuff like that. They all want to talk about their success rates of the kids and whatnot, and I would agree with Tom, there's probably a need for this. But there's also going to be failures of these kids that they're going to leave. And when they leave, they're going to need something to drive. And they're going to go whichever direction's closest to whichever direction they need to go. I guess that's my concern. Like I said, there's probably a need for it, just like he said, not in our backyard. So I guess that's all I got.
Okay, I'll take one more. Sir? Are you an opponent as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Could we have the map back up?
My name is Aaron Shavy. I live at 46806 Prairie View Street, which is approximately a mile northwest. And I guess my question would be, knowing the agriculture land that is there's no rural sewer that goes through that area. And I think Minnehaha's got an ordinance saying so many to land, and you're going to add 3 more septic tanks to that area. The second thing is, they talked about Dwayne Spader owning that land previously, which he did. We had formed community covenants. There's 4 houses up in that area that we've kept going with the state of Pierre that nobody's addressed, that said only single-family dwellings on that. I don't know where that stands, but am we doing something that we shouldn't be doing? Is that covenants waived, means our family bought it, or is that something that we should be looking at too before we get too far? That's all I had.
Any other questions for anybody?
Is it closed now?
It is.
Okay.
Floor is closed.
I think, if I might, that septic system is an issue that needs to be addressed. It's not in our conditions, is it? Anywhere? septic system?
Adequate,
think it was
under
mentioned in there.
2A3, adequate sanitary sewer.
Okay. That sounds good. What is the date that they would have to, opponents would have to appeal by in order to bring it to the full commission?
This will automatically go to the commission for hearing.
Okay, so this is going to be heard by the commission. And what would be the date of that hearing? Is that the 29th?
So,
That's in February it would be.
the question is when will this go forward? So as a rezoning, this project will have to be heard again in front of the county board of commissioners. That hearing date will be set Tuesday, February 20th, at or after 9 a.m.
So we'll be doing this all again on February 20th.
Yep, and that'll be in front of the county board, and they will make the final decision. So if that'll be, you will make a recommendation, so you'll recommend approval or you'll recommend a denial, and then it'll go in front of the county board and they make the final decision. So they can either take your recommendation and approve it or deny it in either direction. So whether it doesn't matter. You just make a recommendation. They make the final decision.
Any other discussion? Mike?
Madam Chair, one item. Just kind of listening to the discussion this evening and hearing both sides, obviously there's some strong feelings both sides for this particular program. But seeing on the board here, I think about it in a different manner too, that if we were being presented the same development by a developer, how we might look at that. If we looked at that not necessarily from the emotional standpoint of how we can help these children, I understand that's a key component of this development, but simply looking at it from a land use perspective, which is one of the things I think we're charged with, how we might look at that if it was a developer coming to us tonight asking for 3 eligibilities essentially. So I'm not saying yes or no right now, I'm just a few thoughts.
Any other comments from commissioners?
I have a question. So the planned development that came in north of Renner, that did not have eligibilities, or was that not a planned development?
Let's see, you're talking about the riding
Equestrian?
arena.
Riding arena
With
with
the-
the homes all around the riding arena.
There was, my recollection, there was 80 acres there, and there was an existing homestead, and I think there were 2 additional building eligibilities, and that plan development was approved for 18 home sites. And that was a planned development, a mixed use, because it had sort of that agricultural use with the riding arena and the boarding the horses, and then the residential use that sort of surrounded the riding arena.
Scott, can I ask you a question too? I mean, I understand the need, but are we setting a precedent here by doing something like this, by allowing this
Well, I think,
particular land use?
I think the answer to that is every action you take ultimately is setting a little bit of a precedent. I mean, every conditional use permit you approve is one that can be looked at a later date by someone else that says, you approved a conditional use permit for a kennel or a daycare across from the street from me, so, it would be hard to say no to someone if it was right across the street, given the similar circumstances. But I think it's also important to realize that every rezoning request is treated uniquely as a singular item. It's not that you look at, a quota across the county of what you can or cannot do, but you look at the request and is it an appropriate land use for that site? And that's something that you have to make a decision on, a recommendation, and then ultimately it goes to the county commission. We'll have another hearing, and the elected officials will consider your recommendation in making their final decision.
Thank you. Any other questions or discussion?
Scott, I have another question. What was Mr. Shavy talking about there with his subdivision having an issue with the state that's been ongoing?
I think he was discussing the covenants.
Oh.
At one time, Dwayne Spader owned all of this land, and he moved the building eligibilities over a mile to the west and created that subdivision. And I believe it's the covenants of that subdivision.
Right.
I would have to look at how this is described. It's not platted, is it? If it hasn't been platted, it's unlikely that they've recorded any kind of covenants on this specific piece of property.
Okay, well, let me just say, we don't, as a county, we don't enforce covenants. That's between you and your neighbors. I would also say, you know, obviously this is going to come to the county commission. I think that, you know, if you don't want things to change, then something's going to have to change. Change happens. None of this is, and you've heard me say this before, none of this is zoned museum. Something's going to happen. You know, if it were someone wishing to build a church, what would we do? If it was someone wishing to build a gas station, what would we do? Each situation is a little different. Recognizing that this is going to be appealed, I look forward to hearing from you, my fellow commissioners, but you know, it seems to me like it's a worthy project from the sense of, you know, and maybe I'm being snowed by all the Christian people here, but it seems to me like this is something that our county could use, and you know, I understand the concerns of the neighbors, but the neighbors have to be careful what they wish for, because something else will come, and it may not be as nice as this.
Okay, anyone else? Becky, did you have a comment?
I just have a question. If this ends up ultimately being approved, do they come back again with a more detailed site plan? I should know, but I don't remember.
In this situation, oftentimes there's a final development plan that would be brought back to the planning commission, and that's not written in this way. You could add that as in the sub-area requirements. If you look at the information that Kevin Hookman put together, there's the recommendation, and then there's the Hope Harbor Plan Development District, and there's some criteria that would guide that plan development. So you could add a number 7 that said a final development plan shall be reviewed and approved by the Planning Commission. You certainly could add that at this point. If you wanted to add, there was some discussion, and I wanted to talk about that, some discussion about landscaping. I would put that under 6C, where you could say a landscaping plan consisting of a minimum of 3 rows of trees along the south border be, you know, approved, be reviewed and approved by the planning director prior to a building permit being issued, something like that. If you wanted to require a landscaping plan, I would put it under 6C.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
Madam Chair.
Paul?
I'd just like to mention that I got contacted by a couple of folks in support of this, and I think one of the main things that I'm looking at with this is the people that have had experience with the program are the ones in support, and that was the same as the contacts that I received. They knew somebody directly that had been through the program and were supporters, and I guess when I look at this and this parcel, there's always a different spot in everything pretty much that we look at. Where should the water tower go? Somewhere else. So from that standpoint, this parcel and the fact this doesn't obligate us to approve another 200-acre development next to it in the future, it's kind of a unique use. I think, from my own personal opinion, from everything I've heard, and again, primarily from the people that have experienced this program, this would probably be a pretty great outfit to have here. And I guess from my own personal standpoint, if 5 years from now my son was 12 and I found our family in a spot, God forbid, that we needed some help like this, I'd sure be glad this was here. So personally, I think this could be a good fit for the area.
Do I have a recommendation from the committee or from the commission?
I would recommend approval.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, a motion is made and seconded to approve the rezoning from A1 Agricultural to the Planned Development District. All those in favor?
Aye.
I have,
Pardon me.
I would like to make an amendment to what has been proposed, and I would like to add a section 6C, that there would be 3 rows of trees planted along the south portion of the property. And the usual wordage that we have, that the trees shall be, you know, maintained and dead ones replaced.
Can we say minimum?
Minimum. Sorry.
That's a friendly amendment, right, Paul?
Absolutely.
So I guess that's the plan.
Okay. Okay, the motion's made and seconded, but there's also been an addition under 6C for the landscaping of 3 rows of trees. All those in favor of the recommendation, say aye.
Aye.
Oppose?
Aye. You better see.
3, so you would cast the deciding vote.
Aye.
So it's 3
So it's
plus
been
and
approved.
3.
Yeah, it's been approved.
Madam Chairman?
Yes.
Can you do a roll call vote? So we
Sure,
make
sure. Okay.
I want to make sure.
Okay.
the record-
Start
Maybe
that in.
Kevin or someone should call the roll then.
He will.
Okay.
Let's write down the names. and
All right.
do a roll call vote.
Okay. Roll call, a vote for affirmative of approval of the motion. Becky Randall,
Yes.
Adam Moorhauser,
Nay.
Doug Odie,
Nay.
Mike Ralston,
Nay.
Paul Kosbuth,
Yes.
Jeff Barth,
Aye.
Bonnie Duffy.
Yes.
Motion passes then 4-3.
See you all here in a month.
We'll move on to item number 10.
Item number
Scott?
10, we received an email from the applicant. He's requested it be continued for 1 month.
Okay.
We need a motion to defer it for 1 month.
Okay. I need a motion to defer item number 10.
So move.
Second.
Second.
Hold it.
10, item 10?
Item 10 before we make our motion.
We have to
Just being deferred, they'd have to come back next month.
come back.
10, okay.
We just deferred to the next one.
So the applicant requested to continue it, and if you so wish, you can make a motion to continue the item for 1 month. If you would like to take testimony, you sure can at this time. I would encourage you to come back in a month, and that way the applicant can hear what is being also said. But it's up to you as the body. If you'd like to take testimony now, you can.
So Scott, just if I'm understanding correctly, we can't vote affirmative or negative, being that the applicant requests that continuance, correct?
Typically, we would continue it. I have seen where applicants have requested a continuation and the planning commission has taken action on it. So, it's up to you as a board. You have full latitude of what you'd like to do.
They've sat through a long meeting.
I will hear it as long as it's limited, okay?
How many minutes?
Jeff Olson, Sioux Falls, 4104 South Cathy Avenue. Our petitioner had submitted a request for a defer, and unfortunately complicated, but the reason we continue to move forward with this was based on his recommendation that the ordinance which is very explicit in regards to ownership of both parcels for the transfer of the eligibility, which we do not qualify, and we understand that. But our petitioner had indicated and gave us counsel that that could be disputed and changed. My main reason in talking with the commission tonight is that I am representing the applicant, which has financial investment based off of the counsel that we received from our petitioner. He elected not to come this evening. So wanted to just briefly speak our concerns, because stated here with the agenda that was sent from the commission, we don't have a leg to stand on. But on the other hand, based off of what our petitioner was going to bring forward, it's put us in a little bit of a financial bind because of what my client has invested up to this point, and based off of how the initial ordinance was stated, we'd have never went this far. So looking more for some recommendations, some help. Obviously, if this is not the time to put forth our request, so be it, but we're here. We know that the defer was requested, and looking for some recommendations from the council. Hopefully that makes sense.
Any comments from the commissioners? Okay.
I'm
go
not a
ahead.
commissioner.
Go ahead, Scott.
I think the ordinance is very clear. The properties have to be in the same name in order to do a building eligibility transfer. These parcels are not in the same name. It's as black and white as that. So they need to remedy that by, like, we occasionally we will do this, probably 4 or 5 building eligibilities a year. They will purchase a piece of property from the neighbor, plat it, a 1-acre parcel. We assign the building eligibility to that parcel, then it's transferred, and then they vacate the plat. I mean, there is a method that you can go through to get a building eligibility transferred. They just have to go through that. I'm a little bit apprehensive about providing a lot of detail, or I mean a lot of advice, because they are being represented by legal counsel, and their legal counsel asked to have it continued. So I brought his request forward to you. And I have no idea what he may be planning as their legal counsel or advising them. I can only tell you that we did get an email from Sam Assam, their legal counsel, asking to have it continued for a month. So.
Any other comments?
I would just concur with what Scott said, that we've seen some things worked that managed to overcome some of these things. Sometimes they can't be overcome, but I think, Becky, you've seen some over the years too, so work on it.
Sure,
get up
just
to the
approach
microphone.
the podium, please.
I know item 9 was really long, so I don't want to take too much time from you, but I'm Jeremy Schoenfeld, live in Harrisburg, South Dakota right now, 609 Hickory Lane. The reason why we're here is, I guess we didn't know what was going on with the whole transfers of eligibility. This is different. We're from Nebraska. We never really knew that this kind of thing actually went on until I read the 2035 plan, which I can see where it has a place. Basically, keep urban sprawl contained, keep A1 land, A1 land. What we want to do is build a house on a section of land, which I don't know if you can really see it in here, but if I can approach, I can give you this. It's just a little bit closer printout.
You can see it on the screen in front of us.
That's right,
Screen in
right
front
there
of us,
in front
pretty
of
good
us,
size.
yeah.
Big here.
Yep. It
Okay.
is.
So right on the corner of the left top hand, or the right top hand side of the way you're looking there, is where an old farmstead used to be, just right there where the cursor is. That's an old farmstead there. The house was torn down. I'm guessing the eligibility was used just to the north of that, and the red, where the red curves in there. We're transferring, or we would like to transfer an eligibility from the neighbors.
Which
it's the big
neighbor?
field to the oh yeah, be from, or whatever that says there. So that's going to stay agricultural land. The land that we are wanting to build a residence on is not currently used. There's no crops there. It's not used for grazing. We wouldn't change any of the current land. There's some crops in there now. There's to the north and the south. There's corn planted there last year, pasture in the middle of both. We wouldn't change any of that. Again, my name's Jeremy. My brother's sitting here. He was sitting next to me this whole time here. We're the ones that are wanting to do this. It seems kind of strange to have to jump through hoops to do this, to me, I guess, when we could just transfer it, because there's no way we're going to not own this land if we get the eligibility. It's in our contract. It's in what we've drawn up with our lawyer. So I don't understand. So we'd need to buy something else to have something else bought to transfer, where if we could just transfer this straight, we're not going to reduce any agricultural land. And if anything, we're going to keep more agricultural land, because somebody's not going to build on the other side of the road there and take up some of the current agricultural land. So I don't know if that makes sense. It's just the way I see it. I know it's maybe not to the letter of the law. We thought a conveyance on the property meant that we needed to have contracts written up that we were going to own both the eligibility and the current land that's on there. Evidently, the lawyers got together, the minds that be, and that is not what a conveyance is. A conveyance is literally owning the deed to one and the deed to the other, which currently we don't own the deed to either one. But in the end result, we're going to own the deed to both. And that's in our contract. It's just not going to happen. We're not going to buy an eligibility and not have the land. We're not going to have the land and not the eligibility. It's just a concurrence of the two. So I don't know if that makes sense. I know it's certainly not the letter, as was stated earlier, that you need to have the deed of both parcels. But it's certainly intent of the 2035 plan is what we're trying to do. So that's all I really have to say.
Question for Scott. Good.
Sure.
Chair, and he's going to maybe answer it already.
I understand his intent, but these transfers of building eligibilities have been litigated in court, and we have several court hearings that have been provided to us vis-a-vis Merton Peterson, north of town. You may recall, I think Bonnie or Becky was probably here 7 or 8 years ago when we went through this process, and a judge, I know Jeff was here, a judge was very specific and said the names of those properties that you're transferring a building eligibility from and to have to be in the exact same name. It can't be husband here and husband and wife on the other parcel. It has to be exactly the same name. So the remedy, and I'll explain this for you. The remedy to this is you as a property owner buy 1 acre of parcel right here. They plat out 1 acre of parcel. The owner of this entire parcel upon which the building eligibility is located tells us that he wants his building eligibility on this parcel. You buy that parcel, then you will, and that is going to be in the exact same name as this parcel. Then you file a conditional use permit and you request to move the building eligibility off of this 1 acre parcel. You slide it over here. And then typically what people do is they sell this back to the original property owner and they vacate this plat.
They quit claim it back. I mean, they
Quit
just
claim it or
give it to me.
vacate it or whatever. And then the building eligibility is now located on this parcel and you are free to build a house. I'm not.
Now, you could also come to the commission and ask to revise the comprehensive plan to allow any of these changes to happen, but that would cause a huge uproar. There are thousands of of building eligibilities along the Big Sioux River in the floodplain that cannot be built because they're in the floodplain. But they can't transfer them over to Humboldt or to Valley Springs. They have to be contiguous and they have to have the same owner. And, you know, there's people all over the county with 12 acres that would really, really like to build a house. And they bought the 12 acres thinking that they could, and they can't.
I mean, and Jeff, Commissioner Barth is correct. We have to be, there is an exact letter of the law that has to be followed in this particular conditional use permit transfer. It can't vary, so it is the way it is.
I just have a question, Scott. This property, the subject property, how large is that, and there are no other building what happened to the building eligibilities that were there?
On this one,
Yes,
I believe they went to this parcel here.
all of them.
There was only, this is a 40-acre parcel?
Oh, it's only 40
It's only
acres?
40 acres, so
Okay.
there was,
Looks big.
it looks bigger.
It looks
There was one on this property. It was assigned to this house here, which left the balance of however many acres this is, 38 maybe, with no building eligibility. And there is one on this side of the road, so.
Thanks, Scott. Come to the podium, sir,
The podium.
so that we can hear.
This is all going to be on television. This, really.
So in the event we go through that process, which I understand fully, if there's an adjacent property owner that would contest the transfer and the commission would agree with them, then my client ends up owning 38 acres that he doesn't have
That's
doesn't have
never
the
happened.
eligibility for?
That's never happened that I can recall.
Well, I don't want to serve as your attorney, but typically when you are purchasing this 40 acres, there would be a contingency that would say you would close on it provided that a building eligibility can be transferred. But I won't say it ever happens. I won't say it never happens. It's unlikely that someone would protest a building eligibility.
Because they're going to want to move one of theirs.
Scott, if I may. Just to make sure I'm clear, because I haven't been through it, because when I read through this, it really seemed like the chicken or egg thing to me, because I saw in the purchase agreement that it was contingent on the building eligibility transfer and all of those things. And I realized today's date, if I remember right, was on there as far as kind of when it had to be done by. But, so, just to make sure I'm clear, though, the legal minds that are a lot smarter than me have read through and said, other legally binding conveyance of each parcel, a purchase agreement that lays that out does not qualify as
Does
other
not.
conveyance. Okay.
In essence, that's kind of the assumption that we were originally under from legal counsel, was that with binding, legal binding contract or the purchase of the 38 acres, and then the contract with the the transfer of the eligibility, we felt that that was going to qualify, and that's what our legal counsel had originally told us we could pursue and get to this point. But I did not find this information out that he decided to defer till 4 o'clock this afternoon. So that's why we were present. That's why we're asking the questions. It was very short and sweet and no time to prepare.
But that exact thing, the way it sounds, is really what's been litigated in the past, and I mean, there's already case law that answers my question if I were to read case law for a hobby.
We don't That's correct. There's court decisions that have clearly said the properties have to be titled in the same name, exactly the same name.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, I guess we'll move on. Do we have to?
I move to
Defer?
defer, thank you, defer for 1 month.
I'll second.
Okay, a motion's been made and seconded to defer. Item number 10, conditional use 1807. All those in favor?
Aye.
Oppose? Motion passes. No old business, no new business, and no county commission business, right? Need a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Aye. We are adjourned.
Thank you.
Good luck, guys.